Good afternoon, class. Our topic for this afternoon is intracranial neoplasm. So this is chapter 30 of the Adams and Victor Principle of Neurology. For the incidence and of the CNS tumor, every year there is an estimated of 600 deaths from cancer in the United States, and of these numbers, patients who died from primary tumor seems comparatively small, around 20,000, compared it to brain metastasis, around 130,000. Okay? In approximately 25% of the patient with cancer, the brain or its covering are involved by the neoplasm at some time in the course of the illness. Okay? Among cause of death from an intracranial disease in adults, tumor is exceeded in frequency only by second to stroke, whereas in children, primary brain tumors constitute the most common solid tumor, and it represents 22% of all childhood neoplasm. Well, this table is taken from a certain registry. Okay, so keeping in mind again that metastatic tumors are more numerous than primary tumors. So the most common intracranial tumor in most series is meningioma, but it accounts for a very small proportion of death. Okay, it is followed in frequency by your pituitary tumors, which are a special case that does not truly belong with brain tumors, except that they are both intracranially located. Okay. So your gliomas, okay, this is a category that includes astrocytoma, oligodendroglioma, ependymoma, and other rare types, okay, and other tumors that arise from your lymphocytes, okay, accounts for a smaller number, no, in this table. Well, for the classification and grading of your nervous system tumor, we have older classification, okay, and a newer version. The older is based on histologic characteristic. Okay, so these are based on the presence or absence of 4 easily recognizable histologic features, such as your nuclear pleomorphism, okay, your mitosis, vascular proliferation, and your necrosis. Okay, and the newer classification is based on the genetic characteristic of the tumor. Okay, it is where they identify, no, that certain genes, no, may act as different behavior of the tumor. Okay, so classifications were based on a presumed cell of origin of the neoplasm. Okay, while the grading are meant to be an estimate of a rate of growth and the clinical behavior, but the two are often concordant. Okay. So this table shows the main feature of the WHO grading system, okay, using a notation of 1 to 4, okay. From yung 1, this is from benign to more aggressive. Yung 4, this is the most aggressive type of tumor, okay. So it denotes the grade and presumed biologic behavior of the tumor that incorporates both histologic type and the main genetic feature. Okay. For astrocytic astrocytoma, the most common form of glioma have been traditionally subdivided into a diffuse, well-differentiated, which is grade 2, anaplastic astrocytoma, grade 3, and glioblastoma multiforme, which is a grade 4 tumor. Okay. So in this new classification, the ependymomas are subdivided into cellular, myxopapillary, clear cell, and mixed type. So the anaplastic ependymoma and subependymoma are given a separate status. So the meningiomas, okay, are classified on the basis on their cytoarchitectural and genetic origin. That this will be discussed later on. Okay, so tumors of cranial and peripheral nerves differentiate into three main types. Okay, we have the schwannomas. Okay, we have the neurofibromas and the neurofibrosarcomas. Okay. So the production of symptoms by tumor growth is governed by a certain principle, which is your Monroe-Carey doctrine. Okay, so meaning the cranial cavity has a restricted volume, no, and three elements contained with it, which is composed of your brain parenchyma, 80% of it composed of your brain parenchyma, blood volume, and CSF volume. Okay, and they are relatively but not entirely incompressible, particularly of the brain parenchyma, and each subject to displacement of a localized mass lesion. So the tumor growth therefore compressed the surrounding brain tissue and displace the other volume such as your CSF and blood. Once the limit of accommodation is reached, usually the intracranial pressure increases. Okay, so increased intracranial pressure and perioptic pressure impairs axonal transport in the optic nerve and venous drainage. Okay, manifesting as papilledema. Okay, and the slow growth of the tumor permits accommodation of the brain to change in cerebral blood flow and intracranial pressure. So only in the advanced stage of the tumor growth do the compensatory mechanism fail and the CSF and the intracranial pressure rise, which will lead to herniation. Okay, so remember that your normal intracranial pressure, is around 80 to 110 millimeter mercury. Okay, so your brain edema is also a prominent feature of your cerebral neoplasm. With tumor growth, the venules in the cerebral tissue adjacent to it gets compressed, with resulting elevation of your capillary pressure. Okay, particularly in the cerebral white matter. Okay, so there are three types of edema. We have vasogenic, cytotoxic, and interstitial edema. So for the vasogenic edema, this is commonly seen within the vicinity of your tumor growth and other localized processes, as well as in more diffuse injury to the blood vessels. Okay, so it is practically limited to the white matter, and this is this is evidenced by a decreased attenuation on your CT and by hyperintensity on your T2 weighted image, and elevated diffusion or reduced anisotropy on DWI MRI. Okay, so this is attributed to a defect in the tight endothelial cells junction. However, studies have shown there's an active vesicular transport of water across the endothelial cells in a more important factor. Next is your cytotoxic edema. So it's showing you swelling of the endothelial, glial, and neuronal cells at the expense of extracellular fluid space of the brain. So the cause of this is a little effect of the oxygen deprivation. Is the cause of failure of your ATP sodium pump within the cell. So the sodium accumulates in the cell and the water usually follows. Then it will result to cell swelling. So this is termed as your cellular edema. Okay. So the most common cause of this one is ischemic stroke. Okay. Usually on CT scan, there's a decreased attenuation, and T2 imaging can appreciate hyperintensity and the increased anisotropy on your DWI. Okay. Next is your interstitial edema. Okay. So an example of this one is an obstructive hydrocephalus, especially when the ependymal lining is disrupted and the CSF seeps into the periventricular tissue in the spaces between your cells and the myelin. Okay? This one. No? So what is the treatment for your brain edema? Okay? So the treatment of brain edema and elevation of your increased intracranial pressure is governed by the underlying disease. Okay? It's either through excision, treatment of the infection, or shunt insertion. Okay, so the use of high-potency glucocorticoids has been a beneficial effect on the vasogenic edema associated with tumors, both primary and metastatic, sometimes beginning within hours. Okay, so probably these steroids act directly on the endothelial cells, reducing their permeability. Okay, so steroids also shrink the normal brain tissue, thus reducing the overall intracranial pressure. Okay, so what's the dose? Around 4 milligrams of dexamethasone every 6 hours. Okay, so keep in mind in giving your steroids, okay, because of different complications such as septic necrosis of your hip. Okay, it is also recognized that these drugs interfere with some metabolism of your anticonvulsant, not especially your antiepileptic drugs are commonly used in brain tumors. So intravenous fluids in the form of normal saline. Okay, it is your normal saline is the preferred fluid, and lactated ringer is also acceptable. But dextrose solution alone in any concentration, okay, like should be avoided because of their hyposmolar concentration. Okay. You can also use hypertonic solution, no? So it will cause shift of water from brain to plasma, okay, in the form of your mannitol. So the dose is around 0.5 to 1 gram per kilogram to be given at 2 to 10 minutes. Okay. Diuretic drugs, notably your acetazolamide and your furosemide, may also be helpful in special instances by the virtue of creating hypersmolar state and by reducing the formation of your CSF. Okay. However, the effect of these diuretics are mild and transient. Okay. Well-controlled hyperventilation is another method of rapidly reducing the brain volume by producing respiratory alkalosis and cerebral vasoconstriction. It is used mainly in the cases of brain trauma with increased intracranial pressure during intracranial surgery, and in the management of patients who have become acutely comatose from a mass effect of the tumor. Okay, but the effect of this one is very brief. Well, the clinical and pathologic characteristic of brain tumor, okay, first, the patient who presents with a focal cerebral signs and general impairment of cerebral function, okay, and headaches and seizures, and patient who presents with evidence of increased intracranial pressure, such as headache, vomiting, papilledema, lateral rectus palsy, okay, and patient who present with specific intracranial tumor syndrome, okay. So patients who present with focal cerebral signs and general impairment of your cerebral functions and headaches or seizure, okay, may experience changes in mental function. Okay, so a lack of persistent application of everyday tasks, you know, like undue irritability, emotional ability, faulty insight, forgetfulness, reduced range of mental activity, indifferences to common social practice. Okay, so all of this um, manifestation, okay, may be attributed to sometimes anxiety or depression, make up the cognitive and the behavioral abnormalities seen in these clinical circumstances. No? So, inordinate drowsiness, sleepiness, no, and apathy may be prominent. Okay, when sometimes when the patient is questioned, no, a long pause precedes each reply, no, or abulia, and at times the patient may not respond at all, or at the moment the examiner decide that the patient has not heard the question and prepared to repeat it, an appropriate answer is given, usually in few words. So no, so very confusing to diagnose this patient if they present it with mental function changes. Headaches, okay? So this is attributed to local swelling, okay, of tissue and distortion of the blood vessels in the dura overlying the tumor, and maybe later on related to your increase in intracranial pressure. Okay, so headaches can be an early symptoms in 25%. Okay, and the location is very important. No, if the tumor is located supratentorial, no, the pain is usually located in the orbitofrontal, temporal, and parietal. If the tumor is located in the infratentorial area, usually in the ipsilateral retroauricular or occipital. Okay, so the characteristic is usually dull, sharp, deep, non-pulsatile, and the characteristic one of the characteristic headache of tumor patient, no, they usually have nocturnal, or they usually wake up because of severe headache, no, during their sleep, associated with vomiting at the peak of the headache. So vomiting and dizziness, small number of patients, no, usually when headaches is very severe, more frequent to usually these symptoms are usually frequently seen if the tumor is located in the posterior fossa. Vomiting is usually not preceded by nausea, no? Usually is observed in children, and this is not related to food ingestion and often occurs before breakfast. Okay. Seizure, okay, accounts for 20 to 50% of all patients with cerebral tumors. Okay. So the first seizure during adulthood is always suggestive of a brain tumor. Always remember that. And has been the most common initial symptoms of a primary or metastatic neoplasm. Most often they have focal onset, they are focal onset, no? And maybe secondary, there can be a secondary generalization. Okay, so as a rule, the seizure respond to a standard anti-epileptic drug and improve after the section. Let's now proceed with gliomas and other related tumors. So glioblastoma and anaplastic astrocytoma, so this accounts for approximately 20% of all intracranial tumors, benign and both malignant, and for more than 80% of gliomas of cerebral hemisphere in adults. Predominantly, cerebral, these tumors are cerebral in location, but they may also arise in the brainstem, cerebellum, and your spinal cord. So the peak incidence is in middle adult life, approximately 60 years old, and much younger in anaplastic astrocytoma, around 46 years old. The incidence is higher in men, with a ratio of 1.6:1, with no familial predilection and occurs sporadically. Okay? So the CSF findings, no, in this particular tumor, okay, they usually demonstrate with an increased CSF protein, no, as well as pleocytosis of 10 to 100 cells or more, okay, with mostly lymphocytic predominance. And this may result from a tumor extending in the meningeal surface. Approximately 50% of glioblastomas occupy more than one lobe of the hemisphere, and between 2 to 6% show multicentric foci of growth and thereby simulate a metastatic cancer. Okay, so this is an area, you know, this is a contrast enhanced T1 weighted image, you know, showing you a irregular enhancing tumor, you know, with the presence of necrosis. When you see necrosis on MRI, most likely we're dealing with a high-grade glioma. So the characteristic histologic findings of glioblastoma are hypercellularity, okay, with pleomorphism of cells and nuclear atypia. Okay. However, your necrosis and hemorrhage are not present in anaplastic astrocytoma. Okay. The necrosis and hemorrhage is only present in glioblastoma multiforme. So untreated glioblastoma multiforme, usually the survival rate is less than 20% for 1 year after the onset of the symptoms, and 10% will live beyond 2 years. Okay, so the median survival with treatment of this high-grade tumor is around 12 months, and without treatment is usually 7 to 9 months. So age is an important prognostic factor, no? Where 10% of patients older than 60 years old survive until 18 months, and 2/3 of patients less than 40 years old will survive until 18 months. Okay, the survival rate, no, in anaplastic astrocytoma is much longer, around 3 to 5 years if left untreated. Okay, so the diagnosis, no, of this tumor, no, so we can request for stereotactic biopsy or craniotomy with removal of tumors at the same time. Okay, so treatment would involve cranial irradiation, no, of a total dose of 6,000, which increases the survival rate by 5 months on average. No? We can give also steroids. No? This will address, no, the vasogenic edema. Antiepileptic drug is only given if there's a clinical seizure. No? And this oral drug, that temozolomide, no? This is a methylating agent given in the, this is orally administered prodrug, which has a lower toxicity and has been shown in several trials to produce slightly superior results. Okay. However, high level of methyltransferase protein, no, if that is the characteristic of a tumor, it signifies high resistance to chemotherapy. Okay. Well, radiation therapy, no, and the use of this temozolomide, with, they usually have a survival until 14.6 months, and if only radiotherapy is given alone, the survival is around 12.1 months. No? And some oncologists would give tyrosine kinase inhibitor. No? These have been developed in response to the upregulation of your endothelial growth factor or your EGFR. So previously, we have discussed the introduction of to the intracranial neoplasm, and we have tackled high-grade gliomas, which is the glioblastoma multiforme, okay, and your anaplastic astrocytoma. So this is the mucosification, okay. So your astrocytoma, astrocytoma and oligodendroglioma, no? If they possess an IDH1 gene, no? It can either be an IDH mutant, no, or IDH wild type. So those patient, no, with that demonstrate an ATRX loss and a P53 mutation, no, can classify it as diffuse astrocytoma and IDH mutant. No? However, if a patient demonstrate, no, on further gene testing with an IP and 19q co-deletion, okay, so we are dealing with an oligodendroglioma with an IDH mutant and IP 19q co-deletion. Okay, and so in the setting of a high-grade glioma, no, if it's positive with IDH1, you can differentiate it into a mutant or a wild type. and further diagnosis can be established. No? If it is an IDH mutant, then the diagnosis is your glioblastoma multiforme IDH mutant. If the IDH1 is a wild type, then you can classify it as a glioblastoma IDH wild type. So let's now proceed with a low and intermediate grade astrocytoma. So this is more common in children than adults. In children, the location is usually the cerebellum, hypothalamus, optic nerve, chiasm, pons. No? However, in adults, no, the most common location is in the cerebral hemisphere, usually in the frontal lobe, next in the temporal lobe, and the third most common location is your parietal lobe. So this is a slow-growing infiltrative tumors with tendency for malignant transformation. Well, on imaging, no, the characteristic finding is the formation of your pseudocysts or cavities. Well, previously, before the WHO grading, this low intermediate grade astrocytoma were classified based on the histologic characteristic. No? So the most common type in adult is your fibrillary type, no? Or your pilocytic astrocytoma in children. Well, next is your protoplasmic, which is characterized by elongated bipolar cells. So your gematocytic, no? This is characterized by enlarged cells distended with hyaline and eosinophilic material. And you can also have a mixed astrocytoma and oligodendroglioma. Okay. So for fibrillary astrocytoma, this is the most common type, or diffuse low-grade astrocytoma. Okay. And as for 2016 update, no, it is no longer exists as a distinct entity. Okay. So the fibrillary astrocytoma are predominantly composed of a tumor matrix rich in neuroglial fibrils, which give the tumors its name and firm consistency. Okay, so usually it stains with your GFAP, no, or your glial fibrillary acidic protein. So pilocytic means hair-like, no, due to the long bipolar processes. Okay, so this is the histologic findings. Okay, so it has a better prognosis than other diffuse type, particularly this is resectable. And based on the WHO classification, this is a grade 1 tumor. So in general, no, pilocytic astrocytoma typically arise from the midline structure, no? 60% in the cerebellum, no? And sometimes in the optic pathway, no? In the optic nerve, optic chiasm, in the hypothalamus, as well as in your optic radiation. Okay. So ito, cystic structure siya, no? This picture, no? An imaging of a patient with a cerebellar cyst, no? Most likely this is a pilocytic astrocytoma if you magnify that in the, under microscope. Protoplasmic astrocytoma is a rare variant of diffuse low-grade astrocytoma with the histologic and imaging features which overlaps with other entities. Okay, so remember that your microcytic areas are composed of proliferation of protoplasmic astrocytes. So usually there's an eosinophilic bodies that are seen in these areas. Okay, this one. Okay, and a multicentric giant cell are sometimes seen in the pilocytic astrocytoma. Okay, and it also stains with your GFAP. Okay, so for your gematocytic astrocytoma, this is characterized by a significant gematocytes population, which are large cells with cytoplasm filled with their eosinophilic material, displacing the nucleus, okay, eccentrically. No? As you can see, there's a displacement of your nucleus. No? So it is important to note that other gliomas, no, can have occasional gematocytes without being designated to a gematocytic astrocytoma. Some pathologies would set a cutoff of 20% of the tumor cells being gemetocytes before you classify this one as a gemetocytic astrocytoma. So in about 2/3 of patients with astrocytoma, the first symptoms is a focal or generalized seizure. No? And between 60 to 70% of patients have a recurrent seizures in the course of the illness. Okay? Other subtle cerebral signs, no, may develop, no, sometimes after years, no, as the tumor enlarges. Headaches and signs of increased intracranial pressure are relatively late occurrence. So in children, the most common, since the most common location is in the cerebellum, so they would present with gait unsteadiness, unilateral ataxia, and increased intracranial pressure. Okay. So you can see here, this is the stain of your low-grade astrocytoma, your glial fibrillary acidic protein. This is a diagnostic marker. Usually, it has uh, variable calcium deposits. No? However, calcium deposits are more commonly seen in oligodendroglioma. The CSF findings are usually acellular. Okay. And in neuroimaging, that there's a T1 isointense or hypointense and a T2 weighted hyperintensity. Okay, this is a T2. Okay, you can see hyperintensity of the tumor. This is the T1. Let's appreciate hypointensity or isointensity. So post-contrast, sometimes there's a variable enhancement of the solid portion, but most of this tumor usually present with cystic structure. So for the treatment of this tumor, there's excision of part of the cerebral astrocytoma can improve survival in a good functional state for many years. Okay, modern techniques of brain mapping, okay, have allowed larger and probably safer resection of this tumor in clinical series. Okay, so the rate of your survival is 5 years after successful surgery has been greater than 90%. Okay. So radiation, usually is delayed in younger patients because it may result to dementia and pituitarism. Okay? And chemotherapy, in the form of your PCV, okay, and temozolomide, has increased the survival rate for around 13.8 years. Okay, so the role of your chemotherapy, the tumors in an oligodendroglial component respond well to combination of your chemotherapy. So let's now proceed with your oligodendroglioma. So this is derived from your oligodendrocytes, okay, as their precursor cell and may occur at any age. Okay, most often in the third and fourth decade, with an earlier peak at 6 to 12 years old. It is relatively infrequent, constituting approximately 5 to 7% of all intracranial gliomas. So the incidence uh, is twice in men than that of women, with a ratio of 2:1. Well, the gross finding of in a resected tumor, okay, the tumor may be recognized as a surgery by its pink-gray color and multilobular form. It's relatively avascular and firm, and its tendency to encapsulate and form calcium and small cysts. Okay. So remember, calcium, is commonly seen in oligodendroglioma. Okay, so in histology, okay, the characteristic feature is your fried egg appearance, which is described as a small round egg nucleus and a halo of unstained neoplasm. So para siyang fried egg. Okay, so this is stained, by silver carbonate, and sometimes it is positive in your glial fibrillary acidic protein. So again, a remarkable degree of progress has been made in understanding the genetic aberration, in these different gliomas. And specifically, a loss of certain alleles, especially in your chromosome 1p, has been predictive of a high degree of responsiveness to your PCV regimen. Okay, and the presence of your chromosome 19q is associated with your longer survival. Okay, and an IDH mutation 1p and 19q deletion, so also signifies a responsiveness to your chemotherapy. Okay, so your PCB means your procarbazine, your lomustine, and your vincristine. Okay, that's the usual regimen that they use, as a chemotherapy. So the most common location of your oligodendroglioma is your frontal and your temporal lobe, around 40 to 70%, and described as situated in your deep white matter with a streaks of calcium, and with a little to no surrounding edema. So mas lesser of edema sa kanila. And it goes slowly. Usually the first symptoms is a generalized seizure, and 15% would only present as early signs of increased intracranial pressure. So few presents with focal neurologic deficits. And on neuroimaging, okay, so on CT scan can appreciate hypodensity, and if there's 50%, there's a high calcium level, so 50% will have intratumoral calcification that will present with hyperdense, So this is a hypodense area. So this is the intratumoral calcification. It will present as hyperdense. Okay. So and on T2, I think this is T2. Uh, T2 image sequence. There's a hyperintensity and heterogeneous mass, and the cortical surface is relatively well. So you can see here less edema, as compared to your gliomas. So surgical excision followed by radiation therapy has been the conventional treatment of for oligodendroglioma. However, because of uncertainty as to the histologic classification of many of the reported cases, it is no longer clear whether radiation therapy is attended by a longer survival rate. Okay? Well-differentiated oligodendroglioma should probably not receive radiation if seizures are well controlled, and there are no focal neurologic deficits after surgery. Okay? So as mentioned, those with IDH mutation and with 1P and 19Q co-deletion, they respond impressively to your chemotherapeutic agents, using your PCV, and this is given at 6 cycles, and others also use temozolomide, Let's now proceed with your ependymal tumors. Okay. So your ependymal tumors, in this new classification have been subdivided, into 4 different subtypes. So the origin of this tumor is from your ependymal cells. Okay. There are 2 types were recognized, by these 2 authors. One was ependymoma, and the other one is the malignant or the invasive ependymoblastoma or anaplastic ependymoma. Okay, and fewer than 10% of all intracranial gliomas are ependymomas, and the percentage being slightly higher in children. Okay, approximately 40% of the infratentorial ependymomas occurs in the first decade of life, as few as early as first year. Okay, so the ependymoma tends to occur in the ventricular system, okay, in children, and they derive from the ependymal lining cells As consequence, they may produce an obstructive hydrocephalus. Okay. And this is the most common gliomas, no, in your spinal cord. Okay. The most common cerebral site is your fourth ventricle. So grossly, ependymoma in this is a ependymoma. So this is your cerebellum. Okay. You can see here, okay, a grayish pink firm cauliflower-like growth, no, arising from your walls of your ventricles. Okay. They may be larger, okay, reddish gray and softer and more clear demarcated from the adjacent tissue than your astrocytoma. Okay. So you can see here, this is a section of the brain reveals a large ependymoma filling out your fourth ventricle. Okay. So the tumor cells tends to form rosettes in the central lumen, or more often circular arrangement around the blood vessels, also known as your pseudosettes. Okay, so your anaplastic ependymomas are identified by their high mitotic activity and endothelial proliferation and nuclear atypia and presence of necrosis. Okay, so remember a genetic aberration, no, of your RELA or RELA gene becomes fused to an open reading frame of your chromosome 11. Okay, so arela fusion positive, no, occurs in majority of supratentorial ependymoma tumors in children, no, and shows a more aggressive behavior. Okay. So the symptomatology will depend on the location of the neoplasm. Okay. The clinical manifestation of fourth ventricular tumors are occurrence of hydrocephalus and raised intracranial pressure. Usually in children, it would present with lethargy, nausea, vomiting, papilledema, and cerebral ependymomas. One-third of them, okay, will present with seizure. Okay. So for the imaging characteristic, no, on CT scan, there will be a well-demarcated heterogeneous hyperdense mass with a fairly uniform contrast enhancement. Okay. Calcification and some degree of cystic changes are common in supratentorial tumors, okay, and but less in the intratentorial ones. Okay. And on MRI, okay, there is generally hypointense, okay, T1 sequence and hyperintense on T2. So remember, an intraventricular location supports the diagnosis of ependymoma, but meningioma and other number of tumors may be found in this location. Okay. So treatment, no. So 47% will die within 1 year, no? And 13%, no, usually they live after 10 years. No? The prognosis depends on the degree of your the presence of anaplasia and the location and whether the tumor or not, or whether or not the tumor is operable. Okay. Surgical removal is supplemented by radiation therapy, particularly to address the high rates of seeding of the ventricle and the spinal axis. Okay. So in the treatment of anaplastic ependymomas, anti-neoplastic drugs are used in combination with radiation therapy. Okay. So let's now proceed with meningiomas. Okay. So your meningiomas, okay, are further subdivided into three types. Okay. So your meningiomas, okay, um, represents approximately 1/3 of all uh, primary intracranial tumors, okay, and 20 to 30% of brain tumors, with an incidence of 6 per 100,000 annually. Okay, So usually these tumors derive from the arachnoid villi or cap cells or dural fibroblasts, okay, associated with the dura mater and your choroid plexus. So these tumors are common in women than in men with a 2:1 ratio, and 90% of the spinal cord meningiomas occurs in women. Okay, so they have the highest incidence, no, usually seen during the sixth and seventh decade of life, no, and some of these are familial. Okay, so there there are evidences that uh, patients who have undergone radiation therapy to the scalp or cranium are vulnerable to development of your meningiomas, and that the tumors appears at an early age in such adult. Radio frequency, okay, exposure from portable cellular devices, has failed to be linked with your meningioma. So the most frequent acquired genetic defect of your meningioma are mutation of your neurofibromatosis 2 gene, no, is found on your chromosome 22, okay, which are found in your fibroblastic and your transitional type. No? This is type 1 WHO tumor. Okay. So meningioma also elaborate a variety of soluble protein, and of which, one of which is the vascular endothelial growth factor, which is highly angiogenic, and this probably relates to highly vascularized nature of this tumor and their prominent surrounding edema. Okay, some meningiomas contains estrogen and progesterone, and these findings may relate to the increased incidence of this tumor in women, its tendency to enlarge during pregnancy, and association with breast cancer. Meningiomas occurs at the site of your dural folds, no? Sa meninges siya galing. Okay? Most commonly, the frontoparietal parasagittal convexity, but, your falx, your tentorium cerebelli, your sphenoid wings, okay, um, olfactory groove, and your tuberculum setting. And 90% of meningiomas are usually supratentorial in location. Okay, majority of the infratentorial meningiomas occurs at the cerebellopontine angle. Okay, so you can see here, this is the covering of your brain. This is your dura. No? You can appreciate the tumor is firm, gray, sharply circumscribed, taking a shape of the space in which it grows. Some tumors are flat and plaque-like, others are round and lobulated, and they may indent the brain and acquire papilla arachnoid covering as part of their capsule. So infrequently, they may arise in the arachnoid cells with the meningioma uh, within the choroid plexus, forming an intraventricular meningioma. Okay. So remember that your meningioma, is beneath the dura and has compressed the underlying cerebral hemisphere. So rarely meningiomas can be more aggressive and invade underlying cerebral tissue and overlying bone. So the behavior of this tumor, the 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 rate of the rate of growth is very slow. So only when they exceed a certain size and indent the brain or cause a seizure, because most of this patient the initial presentation is seizure, So focal seizure, usually an early sign of meningiomas that overlies your cerebrum, okay? And slowly progressive spastic weakness of one or numbness of one leg or later both with subsequent incontinence, So meaning could affect the location could be in your parasagittal frontoparietal area. So the cells of your meningiomas are relatively uniform with round or elongated nuclei. no? Visible endoplasmic membrane, and the characteristic tendency to encircle to one another. So this is very typical, no, of asamoma bodies. No? So this is a notable electron microscopy. No? Uh, you can observe a formation of a very complex interdigitation between cells in the presence of your desmosomes. Okay? So aside from samoma bodies is not specific for your meningioma, no? but can also be seen in other diseases like your papillary thyroid carcinoma, your renal carcinoma, your ovarian papillary serous cyst adenoma. So this is the grading has been done on the basis of histologic markers, which includes the presence and number of mitotic figure, overall cellularity, okay, nuclear to cytoplasmic ratio, nuclear prominence, and the presence of necrosis. Okay, so according to the WHO, no, your meningioma can be graded from 1 to 3, from 1 being the most of meningiomas are benign, grade 2 for atypical meningiomas consisting of 6 to 23% of meningiomas, no? And WHO grade 3, very, this is very rare, no? And classified as your anaplastic meningioma. So the proliferation, okay, okay, in general, uh, the cellular proliferation increases in the proportion to grade. Okay, so the mitotic index, you know, and your Ki-67 proliferation index usually correlates with the volume of growth rate. No? So those patients with more than 4%, no, with a K-index of more than 4% have an increased risk of recurrence similar to that of your atypical meningioma. And those more than 20% are associated with death rates analogous to those associated with anaplastic meningioma. So remember that a mitotic index of more than 4 mitosis per 100 high power fields, this is considered as malignant meningioma. Okay. So this is the 2016, this is how they classify your meningioma, no? In the latest classification. So for grade 1, no, absence of brain invasion. So 9 histologic subtypes. Okay. For grade 2, the mitotic count is more than 4. Okay. And there's a presence of brain invasion. Okay. And for grade 3, the mitotic count is more than 20. Okay. And these are the histologic characteristic for this specific grade. You have a rhabdoid and your papillary meningioma. Well, this figure shows the major growth pattern of your meningioma. Okay, so this is the fundamental structure pattern. Okay, letter A, most meningioma. You can have abundant cytoplasm, densely interdigitating cell processes interconnected by your desmosomes. Okay. And these cells can grow as concentric spheres or whorls. No? So this one, no, this is seen in large lobules of cells. Okay, so or they can appear as fascicles, no? Fascicles or spindle cells. No? And this letter D, okay, cells within the walls tend to degenerate and calcifies, producing samoma bodies. Okay, so on histologic section, this major growth patterns leads to major uh, meningioma subtype. No, so this is the transitional, okay, the meningothelial, and your fibroblastic. Okay, so if it forms with concentric spheres, most likely transitional. Okay, you can observe lobules of cells, meningothelial. Okay, And if you have a degeneration and they tend to calcify, producing samoma bodies, no? Most likely you're dealing with a fibroblastic type. So your meningothelial is the most common variant, no? This one. And characterized by lobules of epithelial cells with indistinct cell borders. So at this low power view, so look as you try to observe a spindly looking cells with pink cytoplasm run in short fascicles. Okay, so your fibrous type is a firm tumor composed of spindle cells with distinct cell boundaries. Okay, sheet-like architecture that may not contain lobules or classic meningothelial whorls. Okay, so for transitional, okay, so the meningothelial and the fibroblastic feature decompose both. No, usually there's a prominent whorls or samoma bodies and cluster of syncytial cells. Okay, and when you see a Samomatus, this is characterized by numerous of your samoma bodies, which can form a confluent masses between which lie an islands of meningothelial and fibroblastic-like cells. Okay. Here, in your letter E, okay, you can see a secretory type. This is characterized by your eosinophilic secretion and may have cytologic atypia with eosinophilic granular or hyalinized secretion referred as your pseudosamoma bodies. So this is PAS positive and CEA positive. Okay, and for your angiomatous, okay, this comprise 2% of all meningioma. So the vascular component should exceed 50% of the tumor total tumor area. Okay, so for the microcytic type, the cell have elongated process and loose myxoid background. Overall, it resembles to a microcyst. Okay, and for lymphocytic lymphoplasmacyte-rich meningioma, this is associated with Castleman disease or other hematopoietic neoplasm and extensive lymphoplasmacytic infiltrates surrounding a clearer meningothelial component. And your last type for the grade 1 meningioma is your metaplastic. So this contains a foci of bone, cartilage, or fat. The histopathology specific of a meningioma with osseous metaplastic changes. Okay. So for grade 2 meningiomas, so there are 3 different histologic types. So we have the atypical. So the atypical is comprised of 5 to 15% of meningiomas with the following diagnostic criteria. Diba? Yung 4 to 19 mitotic figures, brain invasion. So the clear cell type, so this is a rare variant, comprised of only 0.2 to 0.8 of all meningiomas. Okay? And this type of meningiomas have 20 to 60% chance of recurrence, even with gross total resection. Okay, so your clear cells are more common in younger patients with a mean age of 29 years. Okay, and last is your chordoid type. Represents 1% of all meningiomas. It is called chordoid because it resembles to your chordoma. And the mean age of occurrence is 47 years old with no systemic symptoms. Okay, so cases in young adults, pediatric population may be associated with hematologic condition, like your Castleman disease. So your Castleman disease is a rare disorder that involves an overgrowth of cells in your body lymph nodes. Okay. And for the WHO grade 3 meningioma, is further subdivided based on histologic findings. So we have the anaplastic, so by the 2016 WHO definition, so your anaplastic type exhibits an overtly malignant cytology, okay, resembling to a melanoma or a high-grade sarcoma. Okay, the papillary type is an aggressive with a high rate of occurrence, and it may metastasize. No, it is often occurs in younger patient and may be difficult to recognize histologically with that of meningothelial meningioma. And lastly, we have the rhabdoid. No? Also, your rhabdoid has a high rate of recurrence. Okay? So when you say rhabdoid morphology, it appears sheets and cluster of variably cohesive large epithelioid cells with vesicular nuclei, okay, prominent nucleoli, and large paranuclear intracytoplasmic inclusion. Okay? So for the radiographic features, so on MRI, it will appear as a strong homogeneous enhancement on MRI with contrast, okay? Usually with dural tail. So this is the dural tail, okay? This is the dural tail, okay? So usually isodense with a gray matter on T1 weighted and may uh, show a so-called your CSF cleft, okay? So your CSF cleft, so this is around the tumor, indicating that we are dealing with an extra-axial location tumor. Okay. So this is the Simpson grading for meningioma. Okay. So the grade 1, okay, usually the extent of resection, okay, is underlying the bone and your associated dura. The recurrence rate at 10 years is 9%. No? So the higher the grade, the higher the recurrence rate. No? And this is the extent of the resection depending on the grade. So for grade 5, simple decompression with or without biopsy. No? For grade 4, subtotal resection. Okay. So for grade 3, complete removal without resection of the dura or coagulation. Okay. So remember that it resects more subtle involvement of the dura, arachnoid, also including your arteries, your veins, nerves that only the surgeon can observe at an open operation that is not obvious, no, in your MRI. Well, for the treatment, okay, surgical excision should afford a long-term or permanent cure in most symptomatic and accessible tumors. The recurrence rate is likely if the removal is incomplete, but for some, the growth rate is so slow that there may be a latency of uh, many years or decades. Okay, so carefully planned radiation therapy, including various form of stereotactic treatment, is beneficial in cases that they're inoperable and when the tumor is incompletely removed or shows malignant characteristic. Okay. Some smaller tumors at the base of the skull can be obliterated or reduced in size using a focused radiation, no, or a gamma knife. Okay. Conventional chemotherapy and hormonal therapy are probably ineffective, no? And this is how you, the algorithm on how you treat your meningioma. Okay. So it depends on the size and neurologic signs, no? Size and also the clinical findings. Okay. So let's now proceed with primary CNS lymphomas. Okay. So this tumor has assumed increasing significance in the last decades because of increasing incidence of your AIDS, no, and other immunosuppressed state. There is a peak incidence in the 5th to 7th decades of life, no, and younger in AIDS patient, around 3rd to 4th decades. No? And uh, it was recognized that the malignant cells were lymphocytes and lymphoblasts, no? Leading to its reclassification as a lymphoma. Okay? It has been appreciated on the basis of immunocytochemical studies that the tumor cells are B lymphocytes, no? So the B lymphocytes or lymphoblasts is the tumor cells, whereas the fine reticulum and your microgliocytes are secondary interstitial action. Okay? Since the T lymphocytes, no, of the nervous system are rare, but they do occur in both immunocompetent and immunosuppressed individuals. So because the brain is devoid of lymphatic tissue, it is very uncertain um, how this tumor arise. Okay, one theory, no, it represents a systemic lymphoma with a partially propensity to metastasize to your nervous system. Okay, and usually the location of your primary CNS lymphoma are periventricular in location. Okay, and 10 to 20% have a extra cranial location, such as your uvea and retinal involvement. Okay, two-thirds of this patient will have ocular lymphoma and develop cerebral lymphoma within a year. Okay, so for the uh, gross findings, okay, we have pinkish, gray, soft, ill-defined infiltrative mass. Okay, so on microscopy, okay, you can appreciate very vascular and meningeal spread results from shedding of cells into your CSF. Okay, remember that this tumor is highly cellular and grows around your blood vessels. Okay, so demonstrating an angiocentric pattern. Okay, so this tumor, they do not tend to necrose. Okay, and they do not occur outside the brain. Okay. So primary lymphoma involving your cerebral hemisphere initially pursues a clinical course somewhat similar to other gliomas, no? So your behavioral changes and personality changes, confusion, dizziness, and focal cerebral signs, okay, are uh, predominantly over your headaches and other signs of increased intracranial pressure. Seizure may occur in adult life, but some have been observed in children whom the tumor may simulate a cerebellar symptomatology of medulloblastoma. So on neuroimaging, CT scan and MRI, okay, you can appreciate dense hypercellular homogeneous enhancing infiltrating non-necrotic, non-hemorrhagic periventricular masses. No? So the REM enhancement may occur and can occur in any part of the brain. Okay? So the characteristic of your primary CNS lymphoma is the disappearance of the tumor after giving uh, corticosteroids. No? They usually disappear after administration of your corticosteroids. So CSF analysis, usually will show lymphocytic and mononuclear pleocytosis, and on immunohistochemical demonstration of your CSF. Okay, there's an elevated of your beta-2 macroglobulin, no, that may spread to your leptomeningeal, okay, area. So EBV genome is also implicated in immune-suppressed individual, and the diagnosis is made using a stereotactic needle biopsy. Just make sure that the patient doesn't take the steroids, kasi baka mawala na yung lesion if you perform your biopsy. So because these tumors are deep and often multicentric, surgical resection is ineffective. Okay? So treatment with cranial irradiation and corticosteroids often produce a partial or transiently or a complete response, but the tumor recurs in greater than 90% of the patient. Okay? So until decades ago, the median survival of patient had been around 10 to 18 months and lesser in patient with AIDS and in other immunocompromised state condition. Okay. So methotrexate, no, is typically administered into the lateral ventricle via your Ommaya shunt, okay, or into your lumbar subarachnoid space through your lumbar puncture needle. Okay. So again, this is the median survival rate. So let's now proceed with the intracranial metastatic cancer. So this is more common than your primary brain tumor. Usually they would appear multiple intracranial lesion. When you see multiple, meaning both right and left hemisphere, and if it involves both supratentorial and your and your infratentorial, this is highly suggestive of a metastasis. Okay, so this is the pathobiology. So there's a detachment of tumors from the primary growth, and it goes to your brain, and their transport to the distant tissues, and their implantation on the capillary endothelium of the particular organ in which they will eventually grow. So 25% of patients, no, who dies of cancer, no, and 80% of metastasis usually located in the cerebral hemisphere, and only 20% in the posterior fossa. So the three patterns of your metastasis, it may go to your dura or your skull, or in the brain itself, or in the craniospinal meninges. Okay. So metastasis to the skull and dura occurs with any tumor that metastasize to the bone, no? Especially they are particularly common with carcinoma of the breast and prostate, and in special cases, no, like your multiple myeloma. Usually the secondary deposit usually occurs without metastasis to the brain itself and reaches the skull via your systemic circulation. For example, in your carcinoma of your brain, no, it will spread through your Batson's vertebral venous plexuses. No? These are your Batson's vertebral venous plexus. This is a valveless system of veins that runs in the entire length of your vertebral column. No? So the route is hematogenously, no? 1/3 is in the lungs, okay, 1/2 in the breast. So melanoma is the third most common frequent source, no? So for the gastrointestinal, usually colon cancer and rectal CA. So for kidney, no, solitary, uh, usually adenocarcinoma of the lungs pa din, no? So multiple usually is suggestive of a small cell carcinoma of the lungs or a melanoma. Okay. So for metastatic tumors, neuroimaging will present a circumscribed mass with surrounding vasogenic edema. So the metastatic tumors from your melanoma and your chorioepithelioma are often hemorrhagic. Okay. So 1/4 of two intratumoral hemorrhage are from the lung cancer. No? And on your left, no, showing you a multiple metastasis, no, from a renal cell carcinoma. Note that the extensive hypointensity, no, hypointense edema in this area, okay, from each surrounding lesion. Okay, so on the right image, no, so this is a GRE. Okay, this is a gradient echo, no, sequence in your MRI, which shows a blood products appears as hypointense or dark. No? So this sequence can aid in detection of small or non-enhancing hemorrhagic metastasis. So most of the metastases that arise from your melanoma and chorioepithelioma, they may tend to cause hemorrhagic tumoral hemorrhage, no? But this is not specific for your melanoma and your chorioepithelioma, but may also seen in your lungs, thyroid, and kidney. Okay. So this is the clinical picture, no? So there's a progressive uh, signs of increase in the cranial pressure. So headache, seizures, focal weakness, no? Depende pa rin sa location. Okay? So current program utilizes various combination of your corticosteroids, radiation therapy, surgical removal, and chemotherapy. No? So for the treatment, no, corticosteroids would prompt and improve of the symptoms of patient due to its effect on the edema. Okay. So most patients with multiple metastases also temporarily benefit from the use of your whole brain radiation therapy. So this is a 2-week period in multiple doses. So some studies have shown 50 to 70%, no, of this patient, okay, uh, shows a response, no, in whole brain radiotherapy. No. A high dose of focused radiation, no, or radiosurgery is considered as the main alternative for a single or several cerebral metastases. Okay. So remember, surgical removal is only indicated if there's a single parenchymatous lesion, and usually the primary tumor is in good control and should be in accessible location. Well, you can use chemotherapy or immune modulating treatment, okay? Prophylactic radiation, no? Especially in the setting of small cell carcinoma, usually prolong survival by 1.5 months and markedly reduce the later emergence of metastasis to the brain. Okay. So let's now proceed with your medulloblastoma. Okay. So this is an invasive and rapidly growing tumor seen in childhood, no? Approximately 20% predominant in males. The tumor usually arises in the posterior part of your cerebellar vermis and neuroepithelial roof of the fourth ventricle in children. Okay, it originates from your pluripotent stem cells that can differentiate into your neuronal or glial elements and have been prevented from maturing to their normal growth associate arrested state. No? So the new classification, no, of the WHO, this is now classified as primitive neuroectodermal tumors. Okay. So medulloblastoma, this is an image, no, showing you involvement of your cerebellar vermis, no, and a neoplastic obliteration, no, of your fourth ventricle. Okay, this one. Okay. Well, chromosomal studies of medulloblastoma reveals a deletion in your chromosome 17 distal to your P53, and it is encountered in several syndromes such as your Gordon syndrome, your Turco syndrome. So the presence of your MYC and overexpression or amplification usually signifies poor prognosis, and the presence of chromosome 6q and 17q, okay, appears to have a predictive value for the behavior of the tumor. Okay, so other studies have shown the presence of JC virus, okay, have been found in 72% of patients with medulloblastoma. Okay, so the clinical picture is fairly distinctive and derives from the secondary hydrocephalus, since it is most commonly located in your fourth ventricle. Okay, so typically, no, the patient will have repeated vomiting and has a morning headaches. So the first diagnosis that suggests itself may be a gastrointestinal disease and abdominal migraine. Okay. However, stumbling gait, frequent falls, and diplopia, as well as strabismus, leads to neurological examination. So in your medulloblastoma, extraneural metastasis is usually common, usually in your cervical lymph nodes, in your lungs, livers, particularly in the bone. Okay. So radiographic appearance of this tumor is distinctive with hyperintensity on both T1 and T2 weighted image and heterogeneous enhancement, and of course a typical location, no, that extends to your fourth ventricle. So remember that your tumor frequently fills your fourth ventricles, no, and infiltrates its floor, no, and seeding, no? And this may also occurs in your ependymal and your meningeal surface of your cisterna magna and around your spinal cord. Okay, so this is the sagittal view. No, you can see here abnormal intensity. No, and your fourth ventricle. Here naman, no, this is an axial view showing you an involvement of your cerebellar vermis and a neoplastic obliteration of your fourth ventricle. Okay. So grossly they appear, no, as solid gray pink in color. No? So the characteristic histologic finding is the Homer-right rosettes, no, characterized by a pale neuropil surrounded by the tumor cells. Okay, so this is a very cellular tumor, and the cells are small and closely packed with hyperchromatic nuclei, little cytoplasm, and many mitosis with tendency to form these Homer-right rosettes. Okay, so this one. No? Well, maximal resection is recommended. No, addition of chemotherapy and radiation therapy. So this is to improve the rate of the survival, free survival, and permits 5% survival in more than 80% of cases. However, poor prognostic factors are younger of age and onset, usually less than 3 years old, with residual tumors and metastasis. So let's now proceed with the ependymoma of the fourth ventricle. So these tumors arises from the lining cells in the walls of the ventricles, and 70% are found protruding into the fourth ventricles. Okay, so the supratentorial ependymoma occurs at all ages. Fourth ventricular ependymomas appears mostly in the childhood. Okay, males have been affected almost twice as often as females, and on this image, the coronal T2 MRI shows ependymoma growing out of the fourth ventricle. Okay, so in axial T2 flare MRI, so this shows a mass completely obliterating the fourth ventricle. So symptoms may be present for 1 to 2 years, okay, before the diagnosis, and about 2/3 of the patient come to notice because of an increased intracranial pressure. In the remainder, vomiting, difficulty in swallowing, paresthesia of the extremities, abdominal pain, vertigo, and neck flexion or head tilt are prominent manifestation. So treatment would usually surgical removal. No? This is the only hope for survival. Whereas an additional of radiotherapy and ventricular peritoneal shunt may prolong the survival. Papillomas of the choroid plexus. This is 1/5 as frequent as the ependymoma that is seen in the fourth ventricle. So they arise mainly in the lateral and fourth ventricles. Well, the ratio of the involvement of the ventricles, okay, is that the lateral, third, and fourth ventricle location with a ratio of 50 is to 10 and 40% in the fourth ventricle. Okay, so essentially these are tumors of childhood. Fully 50% cause symptoms in the first year of life and 75% in the first decade. Okay, so the treatment is surgical excision, palliative ventricular peritoneal shunt may be needed before the surgery, and despite the treatment, the prognosis is poor. So next is the hemangioblastoma of the cerebellum. Okay, so this tumor is referred to most often in connection with the von Hippel-Lindau disease, of which it is essential elements of dizziness, ataxia, or gait problem. Okay, on one side, no, symptoms and signs of increased intracranial pressure from the compression of the fourth ventricle, and in some instances, an associated retinal angioma and hepatic and pancreatic cysts. Okay, so there is a tendency later for the development of malignancy, such as renal or adrenal cancer. And the age of onset is usually 15 to 50 years old. Okay, blacks, white, and Asians are equally affected. So the dominant nature of the inheritance of the von Hippel-Lindau disease is well known in this particular tumor. So the diagnosis can be deduced from the appearance of CT and MRI of a cerebellar cyst, okay, containing of enhancing nodular lesion on its wall, often associated with retinal hemangioblastoma or a retinal hemangioma, okay, will be disclosed by the same imaging procedure. Okay, so the angiographic picture shown here, no, there's a cluster of small vessels forming a mass of around 1 to 2 centimeters in diameter. So craniotomy with opening of the cerebellar cyst and excision of the mural hemangioblastomatous nodules is usually curative, but there is a high frequency, high rate of recurrence if the tumor is not entirely removed, no, including a single nodule. Next is pineal tumors. Okay. So originally they were all thought to be composed of pineal cells. However, they were classified as true pinealomas, as termed by some authors, no, that is believed that originated from the embryonic pineal cells. Okay, but pointed out that some tumors in the pineal regions are really atypical teratomas, resembling to a seminoma of the testicles. Okay, so they are common in children, adolescents, and young adults with male preponderance and are rare beyond 30 years old. On imaging, T2-weighted MRI in the sagittal plane, okay, shows a tumor that compressed the tectum of the cerebral aqueduct. Okay, this area. Okay, so an axial T2 FLAIR MRI. Okay, so showing you evidence of hydrocephalus. Okay, and transependymal flow of the CSF from the lateral ventricles, resulting from an aqueductal compression. Okay, so you have the tumor here. So there are 4 types of pineal tumors that are recognized. So we have the germinoma, which is the most common. We have non-germinomatous germ cell tumor. We have pinealoma. Okay, so under your pinealoma, you have your pineocytoma, atypical pineocytoma, and your pineoblastoma. So the most benign among this one, grade 1, is your pineocytoma, and the most aggressive one is your pineoblastoma. And lastly, glioma, originating in the astroglial cells of the pineal body, and also seen in this location. So the pineal germinoma has its origin in the germinal cells and is therefore classified separately from tumors that arise in your pineal cells. So it is described as firm, discrete mass that usually reaches 3 to 4 centimeters in greatest diameter. It compresses the superior colliculus, no? And sometimes the superior surface of the cerebellum and narrows the aqueduct of Sylvius. Okay? Often it extends anteriorly into your third ventricle and may then compress the hypothalamus. So a germinoma may also arise in the suprasellar area. Okay? So macroscopically, these tumors are composed of large spherical epithelial cells separated by a bundle of reticular connective tissue, okay, and containing a lot of lymphocytes. So pineocytoma, a typical pineocytoma and pineoblastoma reproduce the normal structure of a pineal gland. However, these tumors enlarge the gland and are locally invasive and may extend into your third ventricle and seed along the different neuroaxes. Cytologically, pineocytoma is moderately cellular tumor with none of the histologic attributes of anaplasia. So the tumor cells extends that forms circular arrangement, so-called pineocytoma rosettes. Okay, pinealocytes, okay, may be impregnated, no, by silver carbonate methods, and some contains retinal S antigen of photoreceptor cells. On the other hand, your pineoblastoma are highly cellular and composed of small, undifferentiated cells bearing some resemblance to medulloblast. So teratoma and dermoid and epidermoid cysts of the pineal body have no special features. However, some are quite benign. No? Gliomas of your pineal gland have the usual morphological characteristic of similar to your astrocytoma of varying degree of malignancy. In some cases, the clinical syndrome of several types of pineal tumors consists solely of symptoms and signs sometimes increased intracranial pressure. Okay, so beyond this, the most characteristic localizing signs, if you're thinking that there's a mass lesion in this area, is a Parinod syndrome. So meaning you have inability to look upward or impaired vertical gaze and slightly dilated pupils that reacts on accommodation but not to light. Okay? So your Parinod syndrome results from an injury, either direct or compressive, to the dorsal midbrain, specifically compression or ischemia or ischemic damage on the mesencephalic tectum. Okay. So pineal lesions were formerly judged to be inoperable. However, the use of operating microscope now makes it possible to excise, okay, in supracerebellar or transtentorial approach. Okay, operation for purpose of excision and histologic diagnosis is advised because each type of pineal tumor must be managed differently. Okay. Moreover, on other occasion, arachnoid cysts that may in this area may only need excision. Germ cell tumor should be removed insofar as possible, and ventricular region should be irradiated for germinomas. And whole neuroaxis is treated in the case of non-germomatous lesion. Okay. The use of chemotherapy in addition to or instead of cranial irradiation is still being evaluated. Okay. Most patients survive approximately 5 years if the mass is completely excised. So let's now proceed with this with vestibular schwannoma. Okay. So this tumor, we have approximately 3,000 new cases, of this tumor in the US. Okay. So the tumor occurs occasionally as part of the von Recklinghausen neurofibromatosis, in which case it takes one or of two forms. The first one is the classic von Recklinghausen disease, or the peripheral or the type 1 neurofibromatosis. Okay? So this is a schwannoma that may occur sporadically, that involves your 8th nerve. Usually it occurs in adult life, but it may involve other cranial nerves. Okay? Or the other types, is the bilateral acoustic neuroma. Okay? This is the hallmark of the genetically distinct neurofibromatosis type 2, in which they are practically always occurs before the age of 21 and shows an autosomal strong hereditary inheritance. This is the trait, the pattern of inheritance is autosomal dominant pattern. Okay. So remember that your schwannomas are distinguished from the neurofibromas, no, found in your peripheral nerves of type 1 von Recklinghausen. Okay. So the tumor occurs occasionally as part of von Recklinghausen neurofibromatosis that has two forms. Okay. So anyway, it typically presents in a solitary tumor in adults, no? Almost always arise from the vestibular nerve. That's why most of the patients will initially have hearing problem, no? So rather than problem with balance, okay? As the eighth nerve schwannoma grows, it extends into the posterior fossa to occupy the cerebellopontine angle, okay? Situated to compress other cranial nerves such as the cranial nerve 7, the fifth nerve, and less often the ninth and 10th cranial nerve. Okay, and later on, as the tumor grows, it displaces and compresses the pons and the lateral medulla and obstructs the CSF circulation. Okay, well, the incidence of this tumor is highest during the 5th to 6th decade of life, no? And male and female are equally affected. Familial occurrence usually is a mark of von Recklinghausen disease. And according to one study, no, the most common manifestation is hearing loss. Okay. So 1/3 of patients, okay, is troubled by vertigo associated with nausea, vomiting, and pressure in the ear. Okay. Usually the vertigo coincided more or less with hearing loss and tinnitus. Some patients ignore their deafness for months or years. Okay. Often, the first indication of the tumor in such patient is the shift to the unaccustomed ear. No, for example, in the use of your telephone. No, and others usually neglected these symptoms to a point where they presented with impaired mentation, imbalance, sphincteric incontinence because of brainstem compression secondary to your hydrocephalus. Okay. Well, on CT scan with contrast, it will detect practically all vestibular schwannoma that are larger than more than 2 centimeters. So still the imaging of choice is MRI with contrast for tumors restricted within the internal acoustic meatus. So there are specialized sequences in your MRI, no, that can accurately define the anatomic relationship between the tumor and the adjacent cranial nerves involved. Okay. So you can also request for brainstem evoked potential. So this is sensitive. Okay. So CSF analysis of this patient, usually the protein is elevated, and a clinically evident acoustic schwannoma is one of the causes of an unexpected elevated CSF protein when a lumbar puncture is performed for other reason. So the treatment, no, hearing can be preserved in 1/3 of the patient with tumors less than 2.5 centimeters. Okay. If no attempt to save hearing, small tumors can be removed safely by translabyrinth approach. Okay. Focus radiation. Okay. The in one study, facial motor and sensory function is preserved in 75%. No, the rates of hearing loss, facial numbness, and weakness are comparable and lower than in surgery. Okay, the use of bevacizumab and anti-angiogenic agent, no, has reduced the size of this tumor in some patients with neurofibromatosis type 2. Okay. There are no actually consensus on the management of incidentally identified tumor, but it is reasonable to follow this with angiogram, no, and serial imaging. So these are other tumor that can be seen in your cerebellopontine angle. No? You can have neurinoma or schwannoma. So this originates in your trigeminal nerve. You can have meningioma of the cerebellopontine angle and cholesteatoma. Okay, so this is an epidermoid cyst. This is very rare. Usually causes more severe facial weakness, and spillage of this cyst may result to chemical meningitis. Let's now proceed with craniopharyngioma. Okay, so this is a histologically benign epithelioid tumor that is generally assumed to originate from the cell rest of the Rattke's pouch, okay, at the junction of the infundibular stem and the pituitary gland. Okay, so remember, by the time the tumor has attained a diameter of 3 to 4 centimeter, it is almost always cystic and particularly calcified. Okay, usually it lies above the sella turcica, compressing and elevating the optic chiasm and extending up into your third ventricle. So the calcium can be seen in plain films, no, in X-ray or in CT scan, no, suggesting a craniopharyngioma because most of these tumor calcified. No, the cella beneath the tumor tends to be flattened and enlarged. So the tumor is described as oval, round, globulated, and has a smooth surface. And the wall of the cyst and solid parts of the tumor consist of cords and whorls of epithelial cells. Okay, so the cyst usually contains of dark albuminous fluid, cholesterol crystals, and calcium deposits. Okay. So the presenting syndrome may be one of increased intracranial pressure, but most often it takes a form of a combined pituitary hypothalamic chiasmal derangement. Okay, the symptoms are often subtle and long-standing. In children, usually the initial manifestation is a visual loss and diabetes insipidus, followed in a few cases by adiposity, delayed physical and mental development, headache, and vomiting. So the visual disorder takes the form of dim vision, chiasmal field defect, or your bitemporal hemianopia, optic atrophy, or papilledema. Okay, and it's often most of these patients, no, in advanced stages, they develop drowsiness, ocular palsies, diabetes insipidus. Okay, spontaneous rupture of the cystic lesion may incite severe aseptic meningitis, no, with a depressed glucose in the CSF and a syndrome to that caused by a rupture of earlier described cholesteatoma. Okay. So the tumor gives increased signal on T1 images because of high cholesterol content. Usually the CSF itself is isointense like the CSF, but occasionally it may give a decreased T2 signal. So the calcium can be seen in plain skull X-ray, no, or CT scan of the supracellular region. So beneath this, so the cella beneath the tumor tends to be flattened and enlarged. Majority of these patients are majority of patients are children, but there are patients up to 60 years old. Okay. So treatment, microsurgery, no, reinforced by your corticosteroids before the therapy, okay, with control of temperature and water balance. So transsphenoidal approach is usually used, no, for smaller tumors. So total removal, no, requires craniotomy, and this remains challenging due to frequent adherence of mass to the surrounding structure. So partial removal usually ensures recurrence of within 3 years. And stereotactic aspiration is useful for palliative purposes. Let's now proceed with pituitary adenoma. Okay, so the tumor arising in the anterior pituitary are of considerable interest, no, among neurologists because of a very unique symptoms of visual disturbances related to your to your optic chiasm before an endocrine disorder becomes very apparent. So pituitary tumors are age-linked, no, because they become increasingly numerous in each decade. So remember that your normal pituitary gland were for many years classified as chromophobe, acidophile, and basophile. No, so these types being presented in a ratio is your the ratio of your chromophobes, acidophile, and your basophile is 5:4:1. Okay, so the adenomas of your pituitary are most often composed of your chromophobes. No? So the pituitary tumors usually arise as a discrete nodules in your anterior pituitary gland. So that is your adenohypophysis, and they are reddish, gray, soft, and often partly cystic with a rim of calcium in some instances. So the tumor less than 1 centimeters in diameter are referred to as your microadenoma, whereas tumor more than 1 centimeter is referred as macroadenoma. Okay, so remember, as the tumor grows, it first compresses the pituitary gland, then it extends upward and out of the sella. It compresses the optic chiasm later. With continued growth, it may extend into the cavernous sinus, third ventricle, temporal lobe, and the posterior fossa. So pituitary adenomas come to medical attention because of endocrine and visual abnormalities. So headaches are reportedly in just one half of the patient with macroadenoma, but not clearly part of the syndrome. So the visual disorder, usually proves to be a complete or a partial bitemporal hemianopia because of the compression of your optic chiasm. Okay. Some patient, if the visual disorder is very long-standing, the optic nerve becomes atrophied. In some cases, the pituitary adenoma extends into your cavernous sinus, causing some combination of ocular motor palsies, as well as potential compression of the cavernous segment of the internal carotid artery. Okay, some neurologic abnormalities are rare but may appear, like your seizure, okay, indentation of the medial temporal lobe, okay, CSF rhinorrhea from the erosion of the sella, diabetes insipidus, hypothermia, and somnolence from hypothalamic compression. Okay. So amenorrhea galactorrhea syndrome, okay, so this occurs or manifests during the childbearing age, of course in the female, where menarche is appropriate for age, the primary amenorrhea is rare. Okay, so the common history is that they, after discontinuing appeals, the menstrual cycle did not establish itself. Okay, and on physical examination, galactorrhea is the only observed abnormality. However, if you request for a serum prolactin, it tends to, the result is increased. No, so remember that the longer the duration of your amenorrhea, the higher the level of your prolactin, and it correlates with the uh, tumor size. Okay, so acromegaly, this consists of acral growth and prognatism in combination with other visceromegaly like headache and several endocrine disorder. So the highly characteristic facial and bodily appearance is well known to you. No, there's an because of the overproduction of your growth hormone after the puberty. No, because if the growth hormone, uh, if there's an overproduction of your growth hormone before the puberty, it will result to gigantism. Okay. So the diagnosis of this disorder, which is often long delayed, is made on the basis on the characteristic of the clinical changes, findings of the serum growth hormone, and the failure of the serum growth hormone to decline in response to administration of glucose or TRH, or the thyroid releasing hormone. Okay, so the new growth hormone receptor antagonist, when this is understudied, your pegvisomant, was introduced to reduce many manifestations of your acromegaly. Well, Cushing disease, it is important to differentiate Cushing disease and your Cushing syndrome. Okay, so your Cushing disease is reserved for cases that are caused by excessive um, secretion of the pituitary ACTH, which in turn causes adrenal hyperplasia. So the Cushing syndrome refers to the effect of the cortisol excess from any other sources, no? So like your adenomas of your adrenal cortex. Okay? So the clinical effect are the same in all this disorder and includes truncal obesity, hypertension, proximal muscle weakness, amenorrhea, hirsutism, abdominal striae, hyperglycemia, osteoporosis, no? And others may have mental disorder. So the diagnosis, no? Virtually chiasmal syndrome plus endocrine syndrome. Okay, on neuroimaging, with CT scan, you can observe ballooning of your sella. Okay, and on MRI, you know, a tumor of less than 3 millimeters can be visualized. So the nodules can appear as hypointense and usually used for monitoring of response to therapy. Okay. So empty sella syndrome, this is a non-tumorous enlargement of your sella. Okay, it is result from a dural diaphragm, defect in your dural diaphragm, which may occur without obvious cause or with a state of increased intracranial pressure. So usually the arachnoid covering and the diaphragm sellae will bulge downwards through the dural defect, and there's a gradual enlargement of the sella. So in this process, the pituitary glands flatten, but the function is not impaired. No? The pituitary function is not impaired, and this may follow after excision of your pituitary adenoma or a pituitary apoplex. So under the influence of treatment, no, under the influence of your bromocriptine, no, especially if it's a prolactin secreting tumor, no, the tumor may decrease in size within several days and the prolactin level falls and the visual field defect will improve. Okay. So, well, octreotide is a newer or slow release somatostatin analogs and have been acting in the dopamine agonists such as like your carbegolide, no, have been shown uh, to improve visual and endocrine function in patient uh, with pituitary adenoma. Okay. So if the patient is intolerant of medication, the treatment is usually surgical using a transsphenoidal or a microsurgical approach with an attempt at a total removal of the tumor and uh, preservation of the normal pituitary function. Okay. So pituitary apoplexy, okay, this is a result from an infarction of the blood supply, no, of your pituitary gland. So usually it's characterized by an acute onset severe headache, generalized ophthalmoplegia, bilateral visual loss, okay, altered mental status, and on neuroimaging, that there's an infarction of the tumor, often with hemorrhage within the enlarged cella. So treatment for this one is acute Addisonian state, no, hydrocortisone. So if there's a blindness, okay, there's you should perform an emergency transsphenoidal decompression if the symptoms persist for more than 24 to 48 hours. So ischemic necrosis of the pituitary, okay, without the presence of a tumor, followed by hypopituitarism, occurs under a variety of circumstances. The most common is a postpartum, being in the postpartum or the Sheehan syndrome. Okay, so this one, this is a hemorrhage, no? There's enlargement of your cella. Okay, so ischemic, this is an emergency. Okay, a neurological emergency. So I think this is the final slide. If you have any question, you can ask your proctor, no, on your lecture time. Thank you and God bless.